Alrighty, I will keep it short and sweet. So basically, I don't know if y'all know this, but my dad's a pastor. So basically, I'm already saved. No, I'm joking, just joking. That's for me? Look at that. Awesome. I don't even know I get one of these things. Alrighty, so I'm sorry if I'm going to look at my notes a lot during this. I also had another presentation for my classes today, so prepping for both of them, I get a little mixed. So, alrighty, so a couple months ago, my dad and I were going for a drive, and I honestly forget what we were doing. We hang out a lot. I was in co-op, and he was talking about this series, and he was like, you know what, I really want to do a series that was kind of like your story, but also talking about like almost those like untouchable subjects. And he's like, who do you think I should bring? And I was like, oh, you know, this person, that person. And he kind of looks at me, he's like, you know, I was thinking maybe you could do it. And I go, why? I have nothing to say. Nothing weird has happened to me. I have no miraculous, amazing story to tell people. My entire, testimony can be summed up with, hi, I went to church before I was born, and here I am now. And I don't know. So I was just really, really confused as to why he would pick me. But that's because I was right in the middle of what God was doing in my life to begin with. So those of you who do know me, when I was in high school, in grade 12, I really just shut down. I was done. I skipped a lot of school. I did the bare minimum. I barely went to school. Trust me, it was like 2-3 days a week. It was terrible. I saw very few people. I talked to even less people. And honestly, if I tell you, I had a sum zero of the fruit of the Spirit. I was not living the way that God wanted me to live. I was checked out. So before we get into what I did with that, we have to understand how I got there. So, like I said, for the longest time, my testimony was my dad's a pastor, I'm saved. That's not exactly true. I mean, he's a pastor, but that doesn't make me saved just because he is. But since the very beginning, I was marked as a pastor's kid. Everyone at school knew me. I was, oh, you're John's kid. Every time I went to a youth event, they're like, hey, I know your dad. And I'm like, I have no idea who you are. And it was really awkward. So, but I was at school, and everyone knew me as a pastor's kid. Anytime I misbehaved in class, they'd be like, Reuben, you're a Christian. Aren't you not supposed to get in trouble? Christians don't do that. And I was like, darn it. You're right. I shouldn't be doing that. And so, actually, thank you. I'm gonna knock that over if you leave it there. I remember the first time I said a swear word at school, and they were like, oh my gosh, guys, the Christian kid said a cuss word. Guys, the Christian kid said a cuss word. And I'm like, so what? You all say it all the time. And they're like, yeah, but you're supposed to be different. And I was like, oh, I guess I am. So I took on this unspoken expectation that I was supposed to be the perfect Christian. Because I was a pastor's kid, I was held to this standard way up here, and I had to be perfect. And I mean, no one could really be perfect. I knew that Jesus was the only one to be, completely sinless, but I had to be up here. No mistakes or happy accidents. This made me feel very lonely. I felt very alone. I didn't feel like I fit in because nobody else had the same expectation of being perfect. And I felt like the only people who could relate to me were my fellow pastor's kids. Caleb. Caleb was the perfect success of the PK expectation. PK for pastor's kid. At school, Caleb was in the IB program, and now he's graduated. That's like the smart kids in school. He was one of them. You knew him. He was smart. At church, he was here. He was leading worship. He played the acoustic guitar. He led the youth band for quite a while. And even at camp, Caleb would crush everyone in Bible verse memorization. Right? You go to camp, and he's the one with that camp record up here. He can quote, what is it, 2 John, the entirety, the whole book. It's crazy. He's very smart, right? So, Caleb's not perfect, by the way. As much as I thought that he was, Caleb, once again, he'll be the first one to tell you that he struggled in life just the same way the rest of us did. Thing is, I never saw it. So I thought that he was perfect, and I thought that I needed to be Caleb. And I wasn't measuring up. Caleb was that perfect standard, and I wasn't meeting it. So constantly I compared myself to him, and he's like, you're not good enough because you're not Caleb. He knows about this, by the way. I didn't just call him out on stage without telling him. Alrighty, so second factor. I struggle with anxiety, and I have this nasty thing called FOMO, which stands for fear of missing out. Those two paired together are a terrible mix. It sucks. Alrighty, so I'm not one to self-diagnose. I wouldn't say I have an anxiety disorder, but I will tell you that, I understand everyone struggles with anxiety at some point in your life. Public speaking might make you a little jittery. But when your ability to cope with that starts to dwindle, that's when it becomes a problem. I had that. I struggled to remain functional when I was feeling anxious. And I was constantly afraid that people were going to find out that I was not living up to their expectations, which is really difficult because if people were around, I felt like I had to be there. But I was also afraid that they were going to find out who I was. So constantly I was like, oh no, I'm not with the people. No, they're going to find out who I am. It's this great balance back and forth in my head. And if I wasn't around people, I felt like they weren't going to like me. And if they found out who I was, I felt like they weren't going to like me either. So I created this image in my head of the perfect version of myself that I needed to be so that I could be accepted by other people. Let's take a step back for a second and ask some general questions about identity, which is kind of what I'm talking about here. By identity, I mean your understanding of who you are before other people. So how do we show who we are as a general? I think, you talk about your socials, you post on social media, that's how you show people who you are. Your brands, what do you wear? What do you use? I use an Apple phone, I'm branded by the Apple company. I wear this shirt, I like Disney, Mickey Mouse. You see me around, I got Snoopy and Peanuts shirts on all the time. I'm a nerd. What do you talk about? The things that you talk about, your hobbies, your interests, the things you say to other people, those will also show who you are and how you think that you present in front of other people. Your community, who are your friends, who you're hanging out with? What are you surrounded by? I work at Kingswood Camp. That's part of my community. I would say that's part of who I am. That's how I identify in front of other people as someone who is involved with Kingswood. But the antithesis to each one of those things is how we hide who we are. How do we hide who we are? We delete things. You delete posts. You delete photos, your digital memories. You delete your search history. I was addicted to porn, but I didn't think that I could tell anyone because I was afraid that if they found out that I wasn't living up to their expectation, they wouldn't like me anymore. You cover things. You hide your insecurities. Going through all of high school, I thought I was fat. I didn't like what I looked like, so I wore baggy clothes all the time so no one could see my figure. You avoid. You don't talk about sensitive subjects. I struggle with my faith, but I didn't think I could let anyone know because if they found out that I was faking it, they wouldn't like me anymore. We avoid personalizing things. We hide behind the idea of we. When we talk about things, we talk about we. We never talk about I. We say we struggle with comparison. We struggle with anxiety. But I never said I struggle with comparison because the second I said I, it made it real. We distract people. We distract people with our good deeds so that they can't see who we really are. I volunteered for everything and anything that I could here so that people could see me and think, he's doing the Christian thing. He's working at church. He's good. He's saved. And I thought that maybe if I distracted people enough with all the good things I was doing, they wouldn't see all the things I was trying to hide. And lastly, we lie. I'm not a good liar. I can tell you if you guys didn't play games with me that have to lie, I turn red. I start, making a weird little smile. Like I can't lie to people. It's terrible. Well, I guess that's a good thing that I can't lie to people. But I lived like I was okay, and I hid who I really was so that nobody would know how messed up I had let myself become. And when anybody asked, I would lie to them and tell them I was fine. And then there were these voices. These different ideas began to personify themselves in my head, and they began to fight each other. You're a terrible Christian. Everyone's disappointed in you. Why aren't you more like Caleb? You're not good enough. God doesn't want you like this. Don't tell anyone. And there's this one little voice in my head that would sometimes pipe up and he'd say, Reuben, you know God loves you no matter what. Well, he got beaten up real quick. I was taught well. I knew the answers to all of my questions. I could prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that God was real. Jesus came here, was crucified, and rose again. And because of that, we could all go to heaven. But that didn't make me feel any better. I knew the answers, but it didn't mean I felt good about them. See, the problem was that I knew God loved me, but I didn't believe it. There's a difference between knowing up here and knowing down here. I knew God would forgive me, but I didn't want him to. I didn't deserve it yet. I thought that I'll clean myself up first, and then I'll go talk to God. So when the voices got a little too loud, I couldn't handle them anymore, I got overwhelmed, I would use self-harm to cope. And oftentimes this was to offset an anxiety attack, and I did this for about 3 years. Like a lot of people, I rode the circuit of the spiritual high. I would bounce from one conference to camp, to challenge, to a winter retreat, and then back to camp again, and we go run that cycle on a repeat. For a while, that was enough. I'd bounce back and forth like a rubber band. My relationship with God and my self-image, my self-esteem, kind of ebbing and flowing in proximity to those events. But this tactic was not sustainable. The spiritual high eventually wasn't enough anymore, and the lows were getting lower. I tapped out, and that's where we get to my grade 12 year. I think I have a video clip here. I want to introduce you to a friend of mine. At the end of the video, you see our friend give up. He's done, and he's not even trying anymore. By grade 12, I was done. I couldn't fight the voices in my head that were telling me that I wasn't good enough, and I couldn't reach my goal of being perfect, so I stopped trying. We see our friend's story in John 5. And I'll read this right here. This is John 5, 2-7. Now there is in Jerusalem by the Sheep's Gate a pool, in Aramaic called Bethesda, which has 5 roof colonnades. In these lay multitudes of invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. Can't talk. One man was there who had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be healed?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me in the pool when the water is stirred up, and while I'm going, another steps down in front of me." I think it's interesting that Jesus asked the guy if he wanted to be healed. Like, no duh, what do you think I'm doing here? But I really think this is different, and it kind of shocks him awake. It shocked me awake. One conference, 2024. This is it is last year. What am I saying? This is 2023. This hasn't happened yet. I'm in the future. No, I'm joking. OneCon 2023. Tammy Giffen is speaking, and I'm sitting back in my chair. Youth events aren't new to me. I know exactly what to expect. I've checked out. I'm done. I don't care. But she began to talk about being stuck in our faith. She said, and I'm paraphrasing, of course. I can't quote her verbatim. She said that there are things in our lives that we need to let go of if we're ever going to see progress in our faith. What is it that you're holding on to? That one thing standing between you and God. You need to let go of that one thing. Suddenly, that little voice in my head got a little bit louder. Reuben, do you want to be healed? Do you want to be okay? Or are you just still satisfied being a mess? I wasn't satisfied. Looking back at the passage I just read, we see that our friend doesn't actually answer the question. Do you want to be healed? Nobody will help me. I can't do it. He was still focused on the fake prize, the pool. He was still thinking about his ability, or rather his inability, to achieve his goal. And he was right. He couldn't do it. He was never going to make it to the pool, and even if he did, he wouldn't have been healed. It would not have worked. Instead, he says, everyone else gets there before me. It's their fault. He starts blaming other people. Just like the paralyzed man, I began to blame everyone else for my problems. It's Caleb's fault. He's better than me, so why bother trying? Nobody else came and found me when I was upset. It's their fault I have these scars, not mine. These are lies that I told myself so that I didn't have to take responsibility for my actions. Let's see what Jesus says to our friend.
Shalom.
Me?
Yes.
Shalom.
I have a question for you.
for me. I don't have many answers, but I'm listening.
Do you want to be healed?
Who are you?
We'll get to that later. But my question remains.
Will you take me to the water? Look, I'm having a really bad day.
You've been having a bad day for a long time. So?
Sir, I have no one to help me into the water when it's stirred up. And when I do get close, the others step down in front of me. And so,
Look at me. Look at me. That's not what I asked. I'm not asking you about who's helping you, or who's not helping, or who's getting in your way. I'm asking about you.
I've tried.
For a long time, I know. And you don't want false hope again, I understand. But this pool, it has nothing for you. It means nothing. And you know it. But you're still here. Why?
I don't know.
You don't need this pool. You only need me. So, do you want to be healed? So let's go. Get up, pick up your mat, and walk.
In my head, I had an image of who I was supposed to be. The perfect Christian, upholding everyone's expectation. Looking around, I compared myself to other people, like Caleb, thinking that he was perfect and I was a failure. I thought that because I was a failure, I didn't deserve God's love, that I needed to punish myself. And when, and only when, I'd finally cleaned myself up, could I approach God. A quote by Ray Ortland reads, "Self-punishment doesn't make you more forgivable. It blocks your way to forgiveness." The image I had of myself was like the pool of Bethesda. I thought that if I finally achieved it, I would be healed. I would be good enough to receive forgiveness. But just like Jesus said in the video clip, this pool, it has nothing for you. It means nothing, and you know it. You don't need this pool. You need me. Now, I'm doing much better. I'll tell you that. I'm not perfect, though. I still struggle with this. Comparison, self-worth, identity are still things that I struggle with. But it's not about what you struggle with. It's about how you struggle with it. Are you going to try and fix everything yourself? Or are you going to try and turn to God and let Him heal you instead? I remember one day, it was the end of last summer, and it had been a really overwhelming week after a really overwhelming summer. There were a lot of things that were out of my control that I could not handle. And I was done. That was it. I turned to God and I said, hey, I can't do this anymore by myself. I can't handle this by myself anymore. And that's the moment when I gave it all up and I prayed to God and I asked him to come and take all of this from me, this anxiety, this idea of myself that I couldn't handle, and I let that go. And let me tell you, that was the biggest relief I've ever felt. So if there's a part of you that you feel like, you're not meeting everyone's expectations, you're anxious that people won't like you if they know all of you, there's pieces of you that you're afraid to share, bring those to God. He's not afraid of them. He knows you, and he's prepared something for you that is so much greater than you could ever understand. He has an identity prepared for you and a plan prepared for you that is so much better than anything you could ever accomplish. So stop trying to do it on your own. Turn to him and let him take care of you, because he has an identity that's going to be so much better than anything you could have ever dreamed of.